Hello, everybody. This is the video for Thursday, January 20th. Unfortunately, we are still doing this. We're still in this phase of uh, virtual learning, e learning, whatever it is. So that's what we're doing. So I want to walk you through a couple things before we get to the actual lesson today. I want to start off actually with just showing you the notes and the kind of the way the format is. It's pretty self-explanatory, pretty simple. You're seniors at this point, most of you, so it shouldn't be something that's terribly surprising. But I'll just walk you through what it's going to look like. So these are our notes. Um, you're going to notice at the top of every page it says bell ringer and the date. So you're just going to be able to follow that. Occasionally, I might assign something, and then we might have to make some adjustments. If I'm ever out sick one day, I don't usually have the sub teach it. I usually will usually just do two lessons the next day, or if there's a e-learning day or something like that, we'll see that. So every day when you come into class, you're going to start off with answering the bell word. Okay. So, and usually, actually, I would say almost always, the bell work is going to be one of two things. It's going to be either something about something that you can answer. It's like, what do you think? Or like this one we're looking at here, why is it important to be informed about the news and events of the day? Okay. So students have two strategies here. And I'm going to tell you which one I would ask you to do. So one strategy is to sit there and cross your fingers and hope you don't get called on to answer that question. Okay, fine. That's your strategy. I don't like it, but that's what some people do. I wouldn't. I would say probably don't do that. Okay. The other strategy is to take your best shot at answering the question. So, why is it important to be informed about news and events of the day? You answer that on your own. You say, I think it's important because we're citizens of a democracy and we vote for our leaders and we have to be able to hold those leaders accountable. We have to know what we're voting for. And so you can answer it like that. Whatever it is that you want to say, this is coming from you. It's coming from why do you think it's important? Okay. The other type of question that you might see is a review question. So if we talk about something on one day and it's something that I think that you need to make sure you understand before we go to the next day, then we talk about something on Tuesday. On Wednesday, the bell ringer might be, hey, remember this thing we talked about yesterday? What did you think about that? Or describe the way this works or whatever. Okay, so every day when you get into class, you don't need to wait for me to tell you. We're always going to start like this. You're going to pull this up. You're going to answer the question and be ready to be called on because you might be called on. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video to answer that question now. Okay. If you need more time, obviously continue to pause the video, but I'm going to move on. So as we go through our notes, you're going to notice two different types of questions. One type of question is the kind of question that you can get from the PowerPoint as I'm giving it. So pretend we're in class now. You're going to be sitting there with your Chromebook open, and when you see the information pop up on the screen, then you can just go ahead and copy it, right? And so this first question, according to PolitiFact, fake news is, okay, well, I'll talk about that, and that'll be right out of the PowerPoint. You can just copy that. If we're on the video like this, you can pause the video to copy it, whatever you want. It works for me. Okay. The next question about Oxford Dictionary defining the word post-truth. Okay. Well, there you go. You do the same thing. Now, the third question here you'll notice is how have you seen people living in a post-truth world? Okay. This is not something that's going to be on the notes nor the video. Okay. I might talk about it in class, but really the question is about you. How have you seen it? And you don't need me to tell you how you've seen it. Okay. So you are going to, in this case, answer that question. Okay. The next two questions are right back to the notes. You can copy the definition of misinformation and disinformation. But then, in your own words, what is the difference between the two? Okay. So you have to, when we do these notes, and we're going to do these notes for the entire 9 weeks of Gov and in the entire 9 weeks of Econ starting today. So when you see these, my expectation is that you are answering every single question where there is a box. If you do not know the answer, don't leave it blank. Figure it out. Okay. You are seniors. Many of you are going to college next year. And it's not an acceptable thing to say, I didn't know the answer, so I didn't even try. I just left it blank. Okay. If you don't know the answer, look it up, Google it, figure it out. And if, or even just try your best. Okay. A lot of this class, government and economics, especially on the government side, is going to be, it's going to be critical thinking. Okay. And a lot of times, critical thinking, you might say something that I wasn't even thinking of. Okay. You might have a perspective that I haven't considered. That's all fine. That's all good. I want to hear that. Okay. So if it's a question like, where do you get your news? There's no wrong answer to that. If you're embarrassed to say that you get your news from Snapchat, guess what? So do most of your classmates. That's fine. Explain that, talk about that, and that is okay. All right. So I'm going to leave this for you, and I'm going to go ahead and start off with the PowerPoint. I would recommend that you maybe do a split screen, do the notes on one half of your screen, do the PowerPoint on the other half of your screen, or the video on the other half of your screen, so that you can watch and kind of go back and forth, so you're not always having to pause. The way that I do that, if you're not familiar with how to do that, is you take it, drag it, and then you make it small like that. So then you can drag it to this half of your screen and then select that. And now you've got, boom, you've got both happening at the same time. So that's what I would recommend for you. One with the video and one with your notes, just so that you can constantly be watching the left side of your screen and doing your notes on the right side of your screen. So that's what I would say. So today we start talking about fake news. We talk about media literacy, all that, but I title it fake news because we live in a world where you can't just, this is not the days of Walter Cronkite. You can't just turn on your channel and believe everything you see. Some of it is fake, some of it is bias, and we're gonna work our way through all of that. Okay. In fact, let me rephrase. All of it is bias, and so my goal for you is to help you understand and identify that bias. So we're going to talk in the next couple days about all these topics on the screen, beginning today with Stanford University study and the prevalence of fake news. So, and then we will continue to the rest of that stuff tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day. I hope we're in class for it, fingers crossed. But if we're not, we're going to have to do it. We have to do it this way tomorrow as well. That's fine. Okay. So according to the fact-checking website PolitiFact, fake news is made up stuff masterfully manipulated to look like credible journalistic reports that are easily spread online to large audiences willing to believe the fictions and spread the word. So if you need to pause the video to get that done, to get that copied, that's fine. I'm actually going to stop my webcam here so that you can see the whole definition of the next one here. Let's see. There we go. So if you need to pause that to get the definition of fake news, that's fine. I'm going to continue talk about post-truth or truthiness. So Oxford Dictionaries recently announced post-truth as its 2016 International Word of the Year. Oxford defines the word as relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. All right, so let me start talking about all this. So the term fake news wasn't really something that was in our discourse as a nation prior to the 2016 election of Donald Trump. Okay, and what happened is, right around that election, there was a lot of what we would call fake news in and around the internet. So let's think about it. Let's say I wanted to get out a specific political message, and my only goal is for people to vote for my political candidate instead of the other one. Okay, let's take the names out of it now. So what I could do is I could create a website. Let's say my website was realnewsnow.com or something. I don't know. realnewsnow.com. So that was the name of my website. Okay. And let's say that I'm going to create a fake story. And my fake story is that a certain political candidate has been compromised and is a spy from a foreign government. Okay, and that's what I want to be out there, right? And I make my story, and I have a picture, and in the picture the politician looks a little bit evil. Now what do? I share the news on Facebook. Now, Facebook Facebook gets a bad rap, and we can talk about why that is. But for now, I just want to talk about Facebook a little bit because Facebook is just where people share their news source, right? So it used to be that if I wanted to get my news, I would have to open up my computer in the morning. And I mean, it used to be even before that, I'd have to open up the newspaper. But nevertheless, before Facebook, I'd have to open up my computer and I'd have to find videos from all these, I'd have to open up the article, the news pages. I have to open up NewYorkTimes.com, WallStreetJournal.com, Washington Post, whatever. I have to open up all those and I'd have to scroll through them looking for what I wanted. Now, Facebook comes along and they change the game with that. They make it so that I don't have to do all that. I can just follow the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and whatever on Facebook, and I can scroll through my feed and I can curate my own feed to make it so that all I have to do is go through there and see what I'm going to see. Okay. Now, where does that leave us with our little example here, right? I started realnewsnow.com and I made a fake article that the candidate that I don't prefer is a traitor and a spy from a foreign nation. Well, now I'm going to post that on Facebook. And Facebook is set up so that, and Twitter's actually the same way, so that thousands of people could share this article. All they have to do is click a button. Now, this sort of blends the old way of doing things, which was that if you saw something on Walter Cronkite, you could be fairly certain that it was real. And a lot of people that grew up in that time, they just don't really, they're not as internet and media literate. And so they see that and it's basically the same thing for them as Walter Cronkite telling them that. And so you see realnewsnow.com and it says, well, it's real news, so it must be true. Or they might not even think about it. They see it, they share it, and then thousands of people might interact with that. Okay. So let's go back to the 2016 election. During the 2016 election, a lot of those stories were shared. Now, were those stories all in favor of Donald Trump and attacking Hillary Clinton? No, it was not the case. There was a lot that attacked Trump and a lot that attacked Clinton, and some that were positive for Trump and some that were positive for Clinton. And it was just this situation where, because of what we know about American politics, is that young people tend to vote more liberal and older people tend to vote more conservative. And because of that, more older people were tricked by these things. Younger person they don't have the same history with Walter Cronkite. They don't have the same history with seeing the news and just believing what they see. And so what happens is these things actually benefit Donald Trump, even though there was a good amount of fake news stories that went in both ways. Now, did this decide the election? In my opinion, it did not. In my opinion, there was a lot of stuff going on that decided the election. One of those things is the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. That was, at least setting aside whether the email thing was real or not, the investigation was real. Also, there was some certain strategy things about Hillary Clinton's campaign that we're actually going to talk about when we get to elections. So there was a lot of factors, and it's really not fair to say this one thing or that one thing caused the election to swing one way or the other. But in my opinion, I don't really believe that fake news and or at least these fake news stories on Facebook really swung the election one way or the other. Okay. Maybe it did. Maybe I'm not correct about that, but I think that there was a lot more going on than just that. Now, here's what happened after, though, because every political analyst predicted Hillary Clinton was going to win. All the websites gave her a 90% chance of winning. All the polling said that she was going to win. Everybody seemed to be really sure that she was going to win. And then when that happened, they had to explain why they were wrong. And then when they explained why they were wrong, one of the things that they came up with was fake news. They pointed to this and they said, well, how could we possibly know that all these people were believing all these made up things. This is something that has not really happened in previous elections. We just weren't really ready for it. And so everybody started talking about fake news, fake news, fake news. And they were saying Donald Trump won because of fake news. Now, you can say whatever you want about Donald Trump, but one of the things that I think everybody can agree about is that Donald Trump is opportunistic and a showman. Okay. And so he took the term fake news and he rebranded it. He didn't just talk about fake news in terms of incorrect and untrue articles that were posted on Facebook. What he started to do is he started to take these articles, or he started to use the term fake news to describe news agencies that had bias against him, like CNN. And so if I ask, what do you think of when you think of fake news? Some of you might say stuff that's on Facebook that my grandparents fell for going into the 2016 election. Okay, that's fine. And some of you might say CNN is fake news. Well, when we talk about fake news in our vernacular in this country, depending on who's saying it, is going to depend on what they mean. For right now, we're going to talk about made up stuff that is masterfully manipulated to look like credible journalistic reports that are easily spread online to large audiences willing to believe the fictions and spread the word. But we also have to recognize that for a lot of people, fake news is bias news. Okay, fake news has been, for a lot of people, rebranded as news that is biased against their side. Okay, and so we have to understand that, right? We have to grapple with that, and we have to know what we're talking about. When somebody says fake news, you have to kind of take those context clues, like what are they talking about? Are they talking about that's fake news CNN, or are they talking about it's fake news something that was posted on Facebook that has no basis in reality? Okay. For us, it's important that we're able to spot that made up stuff. It's also important that we are able to spot the bias. Okay. Because both are things that you're going to have to grapple with in your time working your way through news and media and all that. Okay. All right. So we've got a couple words here. We've got misinformation and disinformation. All right. So what is the difference between these two? So misinformation is false or inaccurate information, especially that which is deliberately intended to deceive. So if I said that, let's see, I'm trying to think of a good example here for this. So misinformation would be something like such and such politician said this or did that, and it's just not true. It was completely made up. It was some person or news agency or a combination of the two decided that it would be good for their narrative if people thought that some politician was saying this horrible thing or meeting with these horrible people or a spy or something, and so they just put it out there, and that would be because it's false and inaccurate, and it's intended to deliberately deceive. Now, the difficult thing about that specific example that I just gave is, let's say that the New York Times is reporting that such and such person with firsthand knowledge said that the politician said this horrible thing. Now, okay, how do we know that that's true? I mean, we might know, we might not know. I mean, it could be that the person who was saying it was lying, or it could be the person who was saying it was mistaken. They thought this happened and it didn't happen. Maybe it got to them through hearsay. Maybe the reporter just made it up. Maybe an editor made it up. There's a lot of places along the chain where in a time where journalism was honest and forthright, we might be able to look at that and say, okay, well, I guess it's true because they did their due diligence. But in a time where journalists have increasing levels of bias and increasingly show their bias in their print and in their TV on both sides, it's really hard to just take those sort of things, an anonymous source with knowledge of the situation claimed this. It's really hard to take that as knowing whether it's true or whether it's misinformation. So that can be really, really difficult. Disinformation, on the other hand, now the definition here is going to start the same way. So false information, which is tended to mislead, that part's the same. Especially propaganda issued by a government organization to a rival power or the media. Okay, so let's talk about disinformation. Disinformation is kind of a tricky word that the media and journalists have sort of conjured up, and basically what it means is any kind of narrative that is different from their own. So if the media has a narrative, and believe me, the media has narratives. If there's a narrative out there that is different, they will call that disinformation. Now, they've intentionally changed the word from misinformation to disinformation because misinformation is just something that's not true. And we can look at something and say, factually, this is or is not true. Maybe it'll take some investigation and some real journalism, but we can say whether something is true or not. It is true that we were not in school today, for example. Now, disinformation, that gets a little more tricky because the media, they're not in the business of just telling you true information. They also are in the business of framing the information that they tell you. And you can look at this, you can watch any cable news show, you can read any article, listen to any podcast. If it's political related, they're going to have their perspective on it. They're going to say, not only is this what's happening, but this is why, and this is what the effect is. They're only going to show you the parts that agree with their narrative. And this is both right and left, right being conservative, left being liberal or progressive. And they're only going to show you what they want you to see. They're going to show you their side. Now, if somebody else, maybe a politician on the other side, or maybe a news media on the other side, or any old person really could offer a different explanation of the facts, they could call that disinformation. It's a way to discredit it without straight up saying that it's false or inaccurate. So here's the good example for this. I don't know if anybody was paying attention in the fall of 2020 to the election stuff. But there was a story that came from the New York Post. The New York Post was started by Alexander Hamilton in the 1700s. It's the fourth oldest newspaper in circulation in the United States. So a legacy paper, not some realnewsnow.com. They had a story about a laptop that was previously owned by Joe Biden's son, Hunter. And there was a lot of stuff in there that I don't need to get into. But basically, as soon as this article was printed where it talked about all this stuff, the mainstream media swiveled and they said this is disinformation. They said this has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation, that the Russians are coming in and the Russians are giving fake information and all of that. Now, months later, after the election, because this came out, 2 weeks before the election? Months later, after the election, they were now saying, well, it looks like it was real. We couldn't have known. We didn't know. Okay, well, what they were saying there is that this is propaganda issued by the New York Post, which is generally tends to have a conservative lean, and it was issued in order to discredit the politician. And so again, the media came and they went the opposite direction with that. So you can have disinformation on either side. The first weeks of the pandemic, when Anthony Fauci said that masks don't work and you shouldn't go out and get a mask, and later he said I was just saying that because I didn't want people to go out and buy all the masks so that our healthcare workers wouldn't have any. Okay, well, still, that is disinformation because that is basically government issued propaganda that is, in that case, it is untrue. Okay, so disinformation is really, really difficult to decipher. Here's what I want you to know about disinformation. When you hear a news member, media person talking about disinformation, a lot of times what they mean, actually most of the time what they mean, is that somebody is telling you something that is true, but that disagrees with their narrative. And that person who's talking about disinformation, whether it's media or politician, if they say disinformation, it's because they want you to view this set of facts in the same way that they do. And you're not viewing it in that same way. You're viewing it from the other side, which they would then say is without context. Okay, so you have to know both of those things. All right. So I believe the next question in your notes was, what is the difference between misinformation and disinformation? I'll help you with this one. For me, really, the difference between the two is that the disinformation includes propaganda, and it includes stories which the person calling something disinformation believes to be out of context or not in keeping with the narrative. All right. So how do we get our news today? Well, I already sort of talked about this a little bit. It starts out over on this side with all these news websites, okay? And we've got CNN, ABC News, Fox News, the Blaze, Infowars, okay, HuffPo, all these different things. Now, most people used to go directly to those websites. They would open up a tab of all their news and they would read through them, and that'd be fine. But today, people get their news through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, whatever. But it's not Facebook who's creating the news. It's CNN creates the news. They put it on Facebook. All these people share it, and then that's how the people get it. Now, you can. One of the things that is difficult about this is because you can follow so many of these different news companies that it makes it difficult to have time to read everything. So a lot of the times, all people do is they read the first, they read the title of the article, and even when you click on it, a lot of times you see this inflammatory title and you read it and you're like, oh wow, okay, I need to read more about that. And even if you click on the article and you read the article, most people don't get all the way down to the bottom of the article. A lot of times there'll be 40, 50 paragraphs. And one of the things I've noticed is that if there's an explanation for what is happening, right? This news website wants you to feel a certain way. And so they give you some facts that are out of context. And then in the 47th paragraph out of 50, they give you the context that makes you go, oh, okay, so this isn't a big deal at all, right? So sometimes you have to read the entire thing, which is why news and media can be so difficult to understand. Sounds good? All right. Okay, so here's the Stanford University study. I believe that this is the last thing in your notes today. So this is right after the 2016 election, where Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton, and people were surprised because most people expected her to win. So this is a study. It studied middle, high school, and college students in 12 states with 7,804 students. Okay. Study indicated that students have trouble judging the credibility of online news, Facebook and Twitter feeds, photographs, videos, blog posts, and other digital messages. So even younger people, these are not your grandparents. These are people your age. In fact, you were probably in middle school in November of 2016 when President Trump was first elected. So this is you, right? And they would see these posts and these videos and things on Facebook and Twitter, and they would have trouble judging whether it was credible or not. Okay. And they struggled to distinguish ads from the articles, neutral sources from biased ones, and fake accounts from real ones. I'm going to have an issue with my own PowerPoint here, because I don't think that there's any such thing as an unbiased source. I think that there are some sources with more bias than others. I think there are some sources that admit their bias, but some sources will straight up have a bias, have a strong bias, and tell you that they don't. They will tell you that they are right down the middle, that they have no bias. They're just bringing you the facts, and that's not true. Okay. They had a lack of verification skills. All right. They could read something. It was hard for them to tell whether it's true or not. And they just move on because they didn't know how to make sure something was true. And then digital news literacy curriculum to address critical thinking skills. Okay. So these are some of the top fake news stories that were shared before the election, and um, you can see what it's looking like. In fact, total Facebook engagement from top 20 election stories, August through election day. So it turns out that more fake news was shared than mainstream news. Now, give me a second to talk about this. I don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Okay. There can be non-mainstream news that is true, right? So just the fact that, in fact, mainstream news a lot of times can be less credible than something that's not mainstream. In fact, without talking about the credibility of any of these things, did you know Joe Rogan has 4 times as many listeners to the average podcast as Tucker Carlson, which has the highest rated quote unquote mainstream news show? So, what makes something mainstream? I'm not really sure. So, something can be mainstream and still fake, and something can be true and not mainstream. So, I take issue with the bottom half of the graphic here, but nevertheless, let's look at some of the things that people shared. So, the most shared story was from a website called Ending the Fed. Anybody ever heard of Ending the Fed? No, because it's not a real place. In fact, they shared 1, 2, 3 of the top 5 fake news stories leading up to the election on Facebook. So the number one with 960,000 engagements. And again, engagements might be people like it, they might comment on it, they might share it. Maybe their comment is, "This is not true." Whatever the case, 960,000 engagements, says Pope Francis shocks the world, endorses Donald Trump for president, releases statement. Okay, that didn't happen. And if you read that, your antennas should immediately go up, because why would the Pope, who lives in the Vatican, which is in Rome, endorse any candidate for president? Okay, the fact is he wouldn't, and he didn't. And if that did happen going into another election, I would be surprised, because that's not the purview of the Catholic Church. That's not what they do. Next one, WikiLeaks confirms Hillary sold weapons to ISIS, then drops another bombshell breaking news. Okay, a lot of stuff with this. First of all the capitalized words, that's not the way that real news is reported. So it feels like clickbait. Okay. Next one, Ending the Fed again. It's over. Hillary's ISIS emails just leaked, and it's worse than anyone could have imagined. That sounds like clickbait. That might as well be, you won't believe how this Hollywood starlet has aged, right? It's basically just like that. Okay. Next one, just read the law. Hillary is disqualified from holding any federal office. Well, I mean, you should know that that's not true, because she was a senator. That's a federal office. Nevertheless, what law would this be? It's not true. Next, FBI agent suspected in Hillary email leaks found dead in apparent murder suicide. Okay, so, and the Denver Guardian. That's, why would a paper from Denver be talking about that, and why would they be the only one? Now, if in any of these cases, okay, you could click on the article. I wouldn't recommend it. You could click on it and read it and make a judgment for yourself. Or you could, let's take this first one. All you would have to do is go to Google. Okay. So we're going to Google, and we're Googling Pope Francis. And we're going to go news right here. And what is Pope Francis talking about? Now, this was way back in November of 2016, or probably October of 2016. Okay, so if Pope Francis had endorsed Donald Trump for president, it wouldn't still be in the news today. But you can guarantee that if you saw that and you Googled Pope Francis, boom, there it is. There is the information about Pope Francis endorsing Donald Trump. And if you don't see that, then you know that it's probably not true. It is not difficult to go ahead and check that out really quick. It's not something that should take you much time at all. if you can't just see that and read right through that. Okay, so let's see. Let me go ahead and open this back up, see if there's anything else we need to talk about today. So, talking back about the Stanford study, was that surprising to you? Why or why not? So we are going to, that's going to be the end of it for today. We're going to stop there. So, hopefully, again, hopefully we're in class on Friday. We can talk about this stuff, and we can continue. We have a lot more notes on Friday, so it's going to go see quite a bit more, and that's really just because we've kind of had to condense everything like this. So I hope you enjoyed the video. You don't need to start worrying about the Friday notes until we get in class on Friday, and if we're virtual again, there will be another video. Okay, look forward to meeting you tomorrow, and have a wonderful day.